In the late 15th century, the world was not smaller in size, but in understanding, and the vast oceans beyond were filled not with certainty, but with fear, rumor, and imagination. When sailors believed that beyond the known horizons lived sea monsters, endless storms, or a void from which no ship would ever return. And Europe, divided by kingdoms yet united by hunger, stood restless and ambitious, driven by the desire for gold, spices, power, and above all, a faster path to the riches of Asia. And it was in this world of uncertainty and ambition that one man refused to accept the limits imposed by tradition and caution. A man named Christopher Columbus, not a king, not a noble, but a navigator shaped by the sea, by maps, by stars, and by a conviction that would consume his life, a belief that the earth was round and that Asia could be reached by sailing west across the Atlantic Ocean. An idea that sounded simple but carried immense danger, because most scholars believed the distance was far greater than Columbus imagined, so great that no ship could carry enough supplies to survive the journey. And for years Columbus was dismissed, rejected, and ridiculed as he moved from court to court seeking support, turned away by Portugal, ignored by England, doubted by Spain. Yet history often changes not because an idea is correct, but because a moment demands risk. And Spain, in the year 1492, was a kingdom exhausted by war, eager to compete with rival empires, and desperate for new wealth. And so Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand agreed to finance Columbus's proposal, not fully believing him, but unwilling to let the opportunity slip away. And with royal approval granted, preparations began for a voyage that would cross into the unknown. And 3 ships were assembled: the Niña, the Pinta, and the Santa María, small wooden vessels by modern standards, fragile against the vastness of the Atlantic, crewed by men who feared what lay ahead, but were driven by promise, desperation, and duty. And on August 3, 1492, the ships departed from Spain, slipping away from familiar shores and into waters no European expedition had ever crossed. And as land disappeared behind them, a deep unease settled over the crew. Days passed without incident, and then weeks followed. The wind seemed endless, the ocean unchanged, the sun relentless, and the men began to fear that the world itself had no end, that they were sailing toward death.
We must take the ship tonight. The men will follow us.
What about the officers?
They die with the tide.
And whispers of mutiny spread quietly at night, as sailors questioned Columbus's calculations, his leadership, and his sanity. And strange signs seemed to confirm their fears. The compass behaved oddly, drifting from expected directions. The sea glowed at night with unfamiliar light, and thick mats of seaweed slowed their progress, giving the illusion that the ships were trapped. Yet Columbus pressed forward, recording 2 versions of distance in his logs, one for the crew and one for himself, knowing that fear could destroy the voyage faster than hunger, because to turn back would mean disgrace, ruin, and obscurity, while to move forward meant the possibility of immortality. And then, after more than 2 months at sea, on the night of October 11th, a sailor aboard the Pinta cried out, "Land!" And as dawn broke on October 12th, 1492, the ships approached a low island rising gently from the sea, its shores lined with palm trees, its waters clear and calm, its sands white beneath the morning sun. And Christopher Columbus stepped ashore, dressed in ceremonial clothing, carrying the banners of Spain, and knelt to pray, claiming the land for the Spanish crown and naming it San Salvador, believing with complete certainty that he had reached islands near Asia, unaware that he stood upon a world unknown to Europe, yet inhabited for tens of thousands of years. And as the indigenous Taíno people emerged cautiously from the trees, curious rather than hostile, they encountered strangers unlike any they had ever seen. Men clad in metal, speaking unknown tongues, carrying weapons that glinted in the sun. And the Taíno offered food, gifts, and friendship, trading gold ornaments for glass beads and trinkets, unaware of the imbalance that defined this exchange, and Columbus described them as gentle, generous, and unarmed. Yet within his observations lay a darker vision, for he wrote that they would make good servants, that they could be easily converted, easily controlled, and in that moment, quiet and uncelebrated, the fate of entire civilizations began to shift. Because Columbus did not arrive alone, he carried with him invisible forces more powerful than steel. Diseases such as smallpox, influenza, and measles. Illnesses that the native populations had never encountered and against which they had no immunity. And as Columbus explored further, sailing to Cuba and Hispaniola, on Christmas Day, the Santa María wrecked upon a reef. Its timbers were used to build a fort, the first permanent European settlement in the Americas. When Columbus returned to Spain in 1493, he returned a hero. He brought gold, exotic plants, captive natives. He spoke of fertile lands, obedient people, endless opportunity. Spain listened, then Spain acted. Columbus returned again and again, this time with soldiers, settlers, priests. Exploration became conquest. Forests were cleared. Mines were opened. Native peoples were enslaved. Disease spread faster than any army. The Taíno population collapsed within decades. Their culture pushed to the edge of extinction. Columbus never understood what he had truly found. He never realized he had not reached Asia. He died believing his original claim. Yet his voyages connected two worlds separated for thousands of years, triggering the Columbian exchange. Crops, animals, ideas, and devastation. Horses transformed the Americas. Empires rose, populations fell. This was the beginning of globalization, and one of the darkest transformations in human history. The legacy of Christopher Columbus remains divided. To some, he is courage and exploration. To others, conquest and suffering. History records him as both. In 1492, a single voyage changed the course of humanity. Borders were redrawn. Cultures vanished. The world became larger and smaller. At the same time, Christopher Columbus did not discover America. People had lived there for millennia. But his arrival marked the moment the world could never return to what it was before. Because once the ocean was crossed, once the worlds collided, there was no turning back.